here to talk about my research. So I have to admit that the topics that I'm gonna share today, it's a very deep actually, and probably I would need 1 hour for each of the topics, but this is a 20-minute presentation, so probably I'm gonna miss some of the important foundational knowledge, but yeah, and I appreciate your understanding if you feel that something is missing from my presentation. So today I'll talk about the intersection of AI, digital biomarkers, and aging in the community setting, and understanding how we can use technology and AI solutions to support healthy and independent living among older adults has become increasingly important. With this context in mind, I'd like to outline the goals of today's presentation. First, I'll highlight the key challenges that older people face when aging in place and why innovative approaches are needed. Next, I'm going to showcase how AI and digital biomarkers research can be implemented, especially in the community setting, in the context of monitoring of physical function and social aspects of health. Finally, I hope to spark some ideas and the discussions around future directions for how to use AI and digital biomarker concepts for aging research. So I want to start with this slide. Like aging is often framed as a problem to solve, but it can be more usefully seen as an opportunity to rethink how we design our environments, services, and support. With thoughtful, inclusive innovation, we can enable older adults to live with greater independence, safety, and dignity. The key question here is not whether change is needed, but how wisely, how smartly we choose to design and implement it. And let's keep this in mind as we move through the slides. And many of us already know the global population aged 65 and over is expected to more than double between 2024 and 2054. And much of this growth in terms of the worldwide population change will be driven by Asia, where the number of older adults is projected to exceed 1 billion, while Europe's population will remain relatively stable and Africa will see more gradual increases. And these demographic changes will place increasing pressure on healthcare systems and social support structures across the world. And with the rapid growth of aging populations, we are seeing not only more older adults, but also greater complexity in their health needs. And I wanted to briefly talk about what happens to the body as we age and how physiological changes across multiple systems influence overall quality of life. Yep, as we all know, the immune system becomes less efficient as we get aged, muscle mass and strength decline, cardiovascular and nervous system function changes, and even digestive processes are altered. And when these systems function well, older adults maintain resilience and independence. But when health becomes suboptimal, minor disruptions can cascade into significant decline. And understanding these biological realities provides the foundation for developing some AI tools that help us detect early deviations, support self-management, and help maintain functional capacity. While understanding the biological changes of aging is crucial, well-being encompasses more than just health. And many older adults desire to remain living independently in their own homes and communities, what we call aging in place. And aging in place presents both opportunities and challenges. It allows people to maintain familiar routines, social connections, and autonomy, but it also required support for mobility, safety, daily activities, and even health monitoring. In the following section, I'll discuss how AI and digital technology can help enable aging in place by some of these challenges. And there are many types of home-based technologies designed to support aging in place. And I'm going to talk about health monitoring technologies or sensors. And first categories is home-based technology, as I mentioned. And these sensors, like the motion or door sensors, these are installed throughout the living space to passively monitor an individual's activities. And it can create what we often refer to as a smart home. And home-based sensors can provide data on where time is spent within the home and track daily activities such as sleep, bathroom use, or patterns of leaving and returning. And these sensors are specifically designed for safety and security. And some of the sensors are designed for safety and security purposes, such as smoke or gas detectors. And importantly, these systems operate continuously and unobtrusively, so it can minimize disruption to daily life. When integrated with an alarm or notification system, they can also alert family caregivers or healthcare providers if something unusual or concerning occurs. On the other hand, um, wearable activity trackers or wearables is another type of health monitoring sensor technology. And these come with different sensors to monitor several indicators of health. So, for example, accelerometers and gyroscopes, they can be used to identify the type, quantity, and quality of movements and activities. Some heart rate monitors are embedded into wearable sensors. Even pulse oximeters are available. And the area of wearables has been rapidly growing over the last 10 years, as we all know, and probably many of you are already using and enjoying this type of technology. And I think this is one of the main drivers that motivate people to adopt a tool for self-monitoring. Um, and with home-based sensors and wearables in mind, we now turn to the concept of digital biomarkers. These are data-driven indicators that can provide insights into health or function in older adults or any individuals living in the community. So digital biomarkers are defined as objective, quantifiable, physiological, or behavioral measures collected through digital devices, like the sensors that I showed in the previous slide. And the FDA further describes them as characteristics or sets of characteristics measured using digital health technologies that can indicate normal biological processes, disease processes, or even responses to an exposure or intervention, like drug trials or any sort of treatment options. And with recent advances in digital health technology, we can now capture multiple biomarkers simultaneously. And it can provide a more comprehensive view of an individual's health and functioning in real world settings. And when we use digital biomarkers like continuous technology-based health monitoring, we would get sheer volume, velocity, and variety of information through one or multiple digital devices, and it creates massive data sets. So think of AI as a super smart assistant that helps us make sense of a ton of data. To analyze this fast and dynamic set of data, we need the processing power of AI analytics to reveal patterns, trends, or associations in the data set. Therefore, AI and digital biomarkers work hand in hand to harness the power of data, and it can enable a more comprehensive, personalized, and proactive approach to healthcare. Now that I have covered some background, I'd like to share how these concepts come to life in my own research. And this is going to be really brief, and I'm sorry for not providing the detailed background of my research projects. And the first example here focuses on mobility-based digital biomarkers using movement patterns and daily activity data to help detect early signs of mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, and dementia. And this project kind of illustrates how continuous real world data can provide insights that are difficult to capture in traditional clinical settings. So MCI is when memory or thinking problems exceed what is typical for a person's age, but daily life is largely preserved. While MCI can sometimes remain stable or improve, it can also be an early sign for dementia, which causes more serious memory and functional impairments. And engaging in physical movement and social activities can protect brain health. There are other prevention measures as well. And detecting cognitive decline early among at-risk populations is critical because it provides more options to maintain independence and quality of life. One promising opportunity approach is using mobility as a digital biomarker. So patterns in how often and how far individuals move in their daily life can signal early cognitive changes. Our project called RAMS study tracks real-life activity and mobility patterns in various life spaces or community spaces to capture these patterns, providing an early window into cognitive health in community-dwelling older adults. So in this study, participants wear two types of monitoring devices for a week every 6 months over a 3-year period. So it's a lot of commitment to collect this type of data. And we also collect the participants' extensive neuropsych the information to see whether they have developed some sort of cognitive decline. The collected mobility data are analyzed using machine learning methods, or we can call it AI methods, such as random forest, to identify digital biomarkers that are predictive of early cognitive decline based on the 3-year of data. And the ultimate goal is to provide actionable insights that can support timely interventions and promote independence in older adults. The main motivation for putting this grant was that we know that there are the blood-based biomarkers or imaging-based biomarkers of dementia, like PET-CT, MRI, and other the genetic biomarkers, but these options are largely unavailable to many community-dwelling older adults. So we wanted to provide or develop some sort of accessible and easy-to-use options for early detection of dementia. And the second example shows how AI can provide some sort of tools for assessing loneliness and address the social side of aging. We call this project as HomePal, and this is a project based on smart speakers and home-based sensors to monitor behaviors and in-home activities to kind of predict whether a person has some experience of feelings of loneliness by looking at the activity indicators as an indirect measures of health. So as a background of this research, we are looking at loneliness. So loneliness is subjective feeling, like feeling disconnected or lacking meaningful relationships. And this is a growing public health concern for all generations, and it's more prevalent among older adults. And there are many research articles talking about the adverse health outcomes of loneliness, like cognitive decline, depression, and even higher mortality. And traditionally, we've measured loneliness through surveys or self-report measures, but those only capture a moment in time. And loneliness assessment is not part of routine clinical assessments. And people have some hesitance to share about their lonely feelings. But with new technologies like smart speakers and sensors, we can now monitor social engagement more continuously and unobtrusively, and it can open the door to earlier and more personalized support. And the project goal is to develop an in-home system that can assess loneliness in older adults using smart speaker interactions complemented by home-based motion sensors. And key features include conversational prompts that can kind of capture acoustic and prosodic aspects of speech, and passive monitoring of engagement patterns, and AI-driven analysis to detect early signs of reduced social interaction or loneliness. And this study involves 70 community dwelling older adults who use the system continuously in their homes over a 3 month period. So sensor data and smart speaker interactions are combined with self-report questionnaires and ecological measures to validate this AI approach. And we aim to provide some scalable real-time insights into social well-being, supporting timely interventions while preserving independence and privacy. Oh, and this figure shows the actual, the example, the sensor deployment in one of the homes, and you can see different types of devices are located in different spaces to capture various activities in home. So as a recap, I'd like to highlight some key insights from this work. So like I reviewed, aging brings complex changes that require proactive support, and AI and digital technology has the potential to augment human care by predicting risk, monitoring functions, and supporting social and emotional well-being. And tools like digital biomarkers and in-home monitoring demonstrate real-world applications, and it enables early detection and more personalized interventions. And this work also points to exciting opportunities for collaboration. I enjoy this aspect of research, like collaboration between different fields, like bringing together data science, engineering, clinical care, social sciences, and ethics. This is essential for the successful implementation of projects. And I didn't have a chance to mention the importance of human-centered design or user-centered design, but we need to make sure that these tools are designed as a way to meet people's needs. So AI tools are not only effective, but also it can be usable, equitable, and culturally responsive. And finally, we must carefully consider some ethical implications like privacy and data security are critical to protect sensitive personal and behavioral data, which are collected from private space of people's homes. And autonomy and consent must be preserved to support older adults' independence and informed choice. And last not but least, we must ensure equity and accessibility so that AI-enabled care does not inadvertently widen disparities. So this is the last slide that I have. Do we do the questions now or later?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions for Jane?
No, other than to say it's very interesting.
Thank you.
I was just curious about the receptiveness of putting the sensors in someone's home, especially here in the US.
That's a great question. So these are not image-based or video-based. So
Yeah.
acceptance rate is pretty good. And I conducted another study based on Wi-Fi signal-based sensing. And in order to verify the AI algorithm we were developing, we need to put video cameras in people's homes. Obviously, people have some hesitancy and reluctance, but there were some folks who want to be involved in the study when they feel that their contribution would be high for helping other older adults.
Yeah, that's good.
Jane, Tom Buckley here. I'm really interested in the topic. About 20 years ago, I tried to develop a ring that would measure heart rate variability, and then send signals that would indicate, impending cardiac events. A very famous company has beaten me to it. But one of the challenges, I sometimes feel sick every time I hear about the Aura ring, because we had developed with biomedical engineering, we had developed that, but we could not at that time get it to store enough heart rate variability data, which is quite greedy in the storage it needs. And we couldn't get it to transmit more than 100 meters. So you had to have a transponder to pick it up. And then we didn't have the technology or AI that we do now. So we were ahead of our time, but we also didn't have the funds to progress it. But a few challenges in that project I found was one, was user ability to manage the technology. And I guess in your cohort, I'm interested in how somebody who may have or may not have some cognitive decline, how they're able to interact with the technology and what your experience there of overcoming that is.
Yep, that's a really great question. And for the first study, we had to be very mindful about choosing the right type of technology for the people that we want to work with. And we are specifically targeting low-income older adults, and many of them have limited digital literacy or even low access to internet and computer. Some of them have never used internet in their homes. So we had to kind of consider these all practical things when we are choosing the right technology. And we decided to use the very basic GPS data logger that doesn't require any smartphone app, because installing an app and syncing the data from your device to a smartphone-based or whatever cloud is another challenge. So we didn't want to go to that route. And I have seen many, many challenges among older adults, not just about wearables, but even understanding the concept of AI. So I'm yes, I'm looking at how to kind of enhance this understanding to make them make an informed choice about whether to be in the study or not, whether to adopt the technology or not, and also what is the best way to improve the design, the kind of adopting universal design concepts to reduce barriers to even purchasing or adopting a technology. So those are really important considerations. And yeah, I think we are going to see more and more challenges because we are seeing a lot of advances in technology, right? In tomorrow and the day after that. Yeah.
I'd love to connect with you outside of this forum, because some synergies in some of the work I'm planning. But I think some of the newer technologies that don't require much user technical skills, just wear it and forget about it. I think where we're going, BioButton and a few other different technologies are opening up a lot of potential. But thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. And John, do you want to go next?
Who?
I think Ken.
Ken
has his hand up.
Ken.
Yeah, Ken and John. I don't know.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
I just have a very quick question about false positives in the first study. It seems there's a lot of threats to mobility that come with aging. And if that were to lead to an indication of the onset of MCI or cognitive decline, that was not true. That could have a dire consequence for the individual. How do you protect against false positives?
Well, that's a good question. So we probably need to look at their functional mobility and even physical function more comprehensively, looking at not just the mobility, but look at the comparing the data to self-report measures. And we assess their physical function in various ways. And we also measure their activity levels by using the accelerometer. So we probably can compare the data from two different technical perspectives. Like one is showing this level of activity, while another is showing this level of mobility. Then what is the true the phenomenon happening here? But that's a great question. Thank you. John, do you have any question for me?
Sure. Not a question, just more of a comment around how I think using sensors in the home could open up a whole heap of other perspectives around health and monitoring as well. For example, if there's no sensor activity for a certain period of time, have they fallen? Have they become really sick? And, that could initiate, I don't know, a message to a carer or a message to themselves, obviously, asking them, similar to an Apple Watch, I guess, when you fall, it asks if you're okay. If you don't respond, it activates emergencies. So there's a whole lot of safety measures, I think, around this that could be employed just by the monitoring system. Yeah.
Right. That's correct. Jacob?
A very nice presentation. I was just curious about data transmission vis-a-vis storage, especially for low-income households.
Yes. So for the first study, all the data are kind of stored in the devices themselves, and we collect the device after 1 week monitoring and download all the data from the devices because those devices don't require any app-based syncing, and even participants don't need a smartphone. So we just do the downloading. Ourselves. And for the second study, it's a home-based sensors, and all the data goes to the university server through the cloud-based storage of the devices, the companies, because we are utilizing commercially available sensors. So there are multiple steps to make sure that data stream is okay, and if there's any the information breach, yeah, and my engineering colleague is kind of taking care of that part.
Can I ask a question? Is there time for one more?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just have a question. I'm Mel Baser, another researcher here. I just wondered about how you see this working in the future, who you think this data would be going, because obviously this is a research context going to the researchers, but would you imagine that this data, for example, would be available to a general practitioner, or how do you, and how, in what form would that be, and how do you imagine they would react to getting more information and having to monitor patients? Just thinking about future.
Yeah, absolutely. So my research is community-based. So I think about how to enable the data access for a community-based older adult. Currently, we don't do anything that can provide data directly to the study subjects. So they don't know what happened to their body in terms of the digital technology-based mobility and activities. So probably for my next step, I'd like to build a platform or a sort of the simple data information sheet. I don't know what the format would be, but encouraging data access or sharing the information about their functional and social health status with older adults so that they can know what's going on in their body. For the first study, maybe as an example, they can see if they are experience the changes in their cognition and mobility, and what's the parallel relationship between those. And yeah, that might be a starting point to navigate the next steps. Like maybe they can initiate a conversation with their doctors, like, hey, here's my cognition and mobility data. What should I do? I want to take some preventive measures here. But currently, we don't have the luxury to develop that step yet, but I'd like to walk further to provide the access to the data for our participants.
Okay, thank you.
Do we want to go ahead and get started with the next one or take one more question?
We might get started, just conscious of time, and then at the end.
Yeah. Feel free to
So
utilize
I'll
the chat too. Everybody should have access to each other in the chat.
Okay, thank you,
So thanks
everyone.
very much for that, Jay. That was fabulous. And then our next speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce Rakita Smallwood. Rakita is a proud Gamilaroi woman, registered nurse and senior lecturer here with us at the University of Sydney. She began her nursing journey through the New South Wales Aboriginal Cadetship Program and has since held diverse roles in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health and well-being across both health and higher education sectors. Rakita has completed her PhD and she was a recipient of a neighboring university's Jambuna Indigenous Higher Degree Postgraduate Scholarship, where she explored historical trauma and resilience among Aboriginal young people, one of the first studies of its kind in Australia. Her thesis was highly commemorated by examiners and proudly sits within the Indigenous research program. As an early career researcher, Rakita's work is deeply rooted in community-led health research, focusing on improving health outcomes and building research capacity with and for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples and communities. And please join me in welcoming Rakita Smallwood.
Thank you, Mel. Yama, everyone. Hello. Thank you for organizing this, Melissa and John, and our beautiful Emory people. I won't need to introduce myself again, but my title for today is Wilingali, for we are the stories we tell, survivance stories. Pardon me. Sorry. Here we go. It's taking a bit of time here. So we begin at the place that grounds me to the Gamilaroi Nation. This place is called Little Wave Rock, located on the second hill of Moore Creek Mountain, just 40 minutes or so from Moombi, a place and a country of my mother's family who have lived there for generations. This place is my tethering to country, which encapsulates my thinking, my experiences, and the stories of our future ancestors. So I take this time to acknowledge country and all it encompasses. I further pay respects to elders past, present, and future, and extend this respect to Aboriginal people across the many diverse nations and places on the sovereign lands of First Peoples of this place we now call Australia, recognising connection to land, water, sea, sky, and sovereignty. I further extend this respect to the Muscogee Greek people who live and work and produce in the land in which and where Emory, Oxford, and Atlanta campuses are now located. Colonisation about 250 years ago now. Prior to that, we had over 500, and we still do have 500 distinct Aboriginal nations scattered across different diverse spaces and places in this continent. Importantly, from probably in a First Nations context over in America, historical inquiry offers valuable insights into the field of health research by consideration of the contemporary and historical collective traumas experienced as a result of colonialism. Whilst being well understood internationally and also sort of more heavily there's a lot more science in relation to this concept over there. To my knowledge, there was little to no research conducted from this frame of reference, particularly with Aboriginal young people and their voices and their perspectives. I began looking at the literature review with a cautionary tale of falling into a trap where we're socialised into the framing and the issues and statistics, whilst problematizing the people. I begin to search for a Google Scholar and I go looking for the problem, and I'm confronted with the problematizing of Aboriginal people and young people and their challenges. I get sucked down this rabbit's warren of deficit discourse and find myself comparing Aboriginal people to non-Aboriginal people. I forget they have not started the same race as others. I then continue to compare numbers, facts, and figures, and the problematizing continues. Initially, I'm stumped, uncertain, and falsely reassured. Surely, as it is written, it is true. I start to write, yet I'm paralyzed with blankness. I'm in a trap of caution. I pull myself out and liberate oneself, though painful. Come back to my research agenda, and ever so softly, my ancestors teach me, remind me, teach hope. And by doing so, we come to a place of self-determination, transformation, decolonization, and healing. This is our ceremony. This is our obligation. This is our agenda. when I sort of first started this project, I sort of went into my PhD thinking about, firstly, how do Aboriginal young people understand the term historical trauma? Because it was a relatively new concept, I thought that people were sort of, and then also how then they understood the impact of historical trauma on their lives and the lives of their family and communities. And then also, how do young people recognise collective or individual resilience as a ways to address historical trauma? I probably can't expand too much, but resilience was a problemed word because it particularly focused on uh, different layers of resilience around this ability that you just have to get back up and back up and back up. But there's actually real more, this reconceptualization of what a resilience is. Positioned in the Indigenous research paradigm, this study has been informed through Gamilaroi ways of knowing, being, doing, and becoming. A process of ongoing critical reflection on my positioning, the community of focus, and also the cultural and ethical responsibilities held both internally and externally as part of a relational approach to research. Highlighted by Martin and Wilson, who's also a deadly Canadian fella. Indigenous research is relationality and country is being centred in the approach. As Aboriginal people, we are relational and no entity is higher than other entities. Our connection to health, well-being is reliant on this connectedness. Further, knowing and being informed from Gamilaroi perspectives recognises that one perspective is not higher than another. Instead, it takes on multiple viewpoints and ways of knowing in relationship to others and self. My research was further informed by reading these Indigenous research principles, and I think I sort of positioned those in my literature review, as you can sort of see how I was unpacking that deproblematizing thing. And the way I actually methodologically done that was I looked at all the studies I included in my literature review, and I just included studies that had young people's voices and extracted that as part of my understanding. So these principles, I won't go too much into them, is really just thinking about resistance as an emancipatory imperative, political integrity. But this is also focusing on this notion of political politicus or something like that. But I was sort of very much informed by this way of thinking about euanoia, so beautiful thinking about the way we position and tell stories, the way we think about how we understand the integrity in which they're trying to tell a story. And most importantly, thinking about all researchers has to be aspirationally driven from this point of focus of privileging Indigenous voices. So it was part of a larger ARC. We'd done some individual yarns, which was during COVID-19, which was via Zoom. It was through purposive snowballing. And importantly, we positioned Aboriginal young people, not youth, not adolescents, etc., but really that 18 to 25 years, just so that we could, manage any sort of distress or also having that awareness of colonialism. Importantly, place-based meaning making and understanding how understanding story is positioned in place, and then that through that process of story and relatedness, Indigenous epistemologies and the way we develop place to ground, the ways in which meaning making is transformed. I drew influence from Arnie Judy Atkinson around her research methodology and the concept known as Didiri, which means to listen to one another or deep listening. And through these collaborative relationships and notions of relatedness, she then enacted Didiri in a methodology as an ethical and cultural guide, dependent then on how it was transformed through meaning making and the research it represented in the participants. So understanding this process, I wanted to look for ways in which I could too ground my research in country. Winingali is defined by Munro et al. To hear, to listen, to know, to remember. And it originates from the northwest tablelands of New South Wales, including our Gamilaroi nations. My first hearing of this term was during the Women's Day on Country, and ochre was painted across my face, and as each stripe was placed, a knowledge holder would repeat, Winingali, to hear, Wenengali, to listen, Wenengali, to know, Wenengali, to remember. Through this process, she would ask me to reflect on ways in which I was sure to hear what was being said, listen to what I had heard, and then how I know and remember this throughout life. She placed emphasis on the ways in which I was sure to demonstrate what I know through my voice and how then this may impact others in time, place, and space. I am giving you a rundown version of my thesis, but after that storytelling, deep listening, engaging myself with the literature, I used a abductive analysis. So instead of deductive, inductive, abductive considers the participant stories, the lived experiences of myself being colonized and colonizer, but also this deep listening practice embedded in story work. And then also that expanding and looking out to understand more. So it's kind of like a spiral, a hermeneutics. And through those questions, those research questions, the first sort of story came through was making sense of historical trauma. So really understanding the experience of colonialism and then defining these experiences through everyday experiences. And often this was situated around schooling and experiences in school and having these happy white histories that sort of disregarded the trauma, the pain, the sadness. The second thing was around identity, because identity is such a political space. Who counts, who doesn't count as Aboriginal? What does it mean to be Aboriginal? And this idea of disrupted identities, conflicting identities, blooming identities, and this questioning, what does it mean for me as an Aboriginal person to be an Aboriginal person? Who defines that? Who accepts that? Who can enable that? Importantly, that final third story is that the young people understand they have to stand up, be part of change, be part of movements, be part of acknowledging this strength of their ancestors. My grandmother might have been removed. These are the stories they'll tell me. My grandmother might have been removed and not had her identity, but I now have that identity and I can take that forward. I can now take that ancestral strength of all those navigations that my ancestors had to do to enable themselves to not be removed. And then thinking about, well, how do we actually change our futures for everyone and bring together these stories? If you haven't already noticed, I also am a bit of a poet and I didn't know it. I'm sharing some poetry as well. Within you, I am carried. Within you, I am here. Within you. Within you, I do not disappear. I linger, waiting near, waiting to appear. Within you, you feel doubt. Within you, you're wanting to shout. Within you, I'm the hurt that you carry, the demon within, the one that holds you account. Within you, you feel shame, loss, and hurt. Within you. When I was sitting in that making sense of historical trauma, because again, I had to be so cognizant of my ability to also place my story, my family's community, my community's stories on these stories. And I was like, no, 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 no. Privilege the young people's voices. But there was this inexpressible trauma, this inexpressible notion of what does it mean to not be able to access your language? What does it mean to not know your totems or not know your position on country or who's going to affirm you in your identity? Who's going to be holding you safely? And there was this inexpressible, intangible essence. And a lot of this one participant just said, within you, it's just within you. The third, um, the second findings was really about this identity. I want to read you just a small piece of poetry here, which was through a method of vox participaire. So you're really just soaking yourself in the transcripts of the young people, and then you sort of write in poetic form. Identity is important to me. Ancestors, kings of Yulu, a mystical place calling me. My country, spread out, complex to understand. Together, we are all one, empowered. Know the impact of colonization, historical trauma. Confident, having a voice, united, more accepting culture. Proud to be Aboriginal. I am Aboriginal, and this is fine. You can actually check out that paper I didn't actually position that poetry in this paper. It's sort of in a different poetry inquiry book chapter that I can share around if you want to have a bit more of a read. But really, this idea of identity is so reaffirming. And I drew this picture of the fluidality of, young people can walk into different spaces and they could be really reassured or affirmed or safe in their identity. But often you can go into these tricksy spaces or these tricky spaces where you might be questioned, or someone might go, "Oh, well, Colin, who are you? Where's your mob? Where's your family?" Or, "What are you doing in this like this?" So this idea of identity being such a varied, fluid, ever-changing thing, and it was highly dependent on that spaces and how it could create or settle both strength and disruption socially. The third and final findings was really thinking about the positioning of Indigenous resilience and resistance and strength. And I really sort of came down to this idea of redefining resilience and what it actually means to understand resilience from an Indigenous concept, which again has also been done quite well over there in North America. But importantly, resistance, strength, and resilience are an integral component of historical trauma. And this idea of continuing and understanding your story, knowing who you are, where you're from, and that might be a little bit blurry, but over time, understanding the blurriness is also a strength. So really, what do Aboriginal young people understand by the term historical trauma? And so they understand that this term through a way of making sense of the loss they've personally and collectively experienced because of continuing colonisation. This loss, is both inexpressible, expressible, tangible, and not. The layers are lost, are multi-layered and generational. They understand the impact through their families and communities as a way of making sense of their own stories and experiences of being Aboriginal. These experiences are associated with how they engage in society and navigate through what this identity means in relation to society temporally. Importantly, young people draw on experiences of their own families, including how they're positioned in settler colonial societies, and they understand that the ways in which to understand and move through collective and individual resilience is relation to is learning our past, growing from our present, and dreaming in our futures. They understand that previous generations who have fought for recognition, justice, and equity, and overcoming historical trauma is not by watching or sitting back, but being part of the movements, change, standing, and speaking up. So this study is one of the first studies to actually understand and seek to understand historical trauma within an Aboriginal context, particularly with young people. Importantly, this lens of survivance or resilience, is around this recognition of need for ongoing active presence and story formation of their past in order to move forward and heal their futures. And I've just I positioned my discussion chapter around that concept, what I said before, which is survivance, which was from a beautiful Weisner over in North America there. He coined this word survivance as this active presencing concept or a literary concept around how we actually challenge the notion of Aboriginality and that term that has been imposed on our communities globally. Importantly, survivance and understanding survivance is knowing that story and understanding that you're an active present and part of your life, or being an active present and part of systems, being an active presence a part of getting educated and maybe going off and doing some sort of higher degree, which a lot of my students were in university. Importantly, though, this study adds to a very limited area of research around social and emotional well-being with young people, particularly around the recognition and navigation of cultural loss, cultural trauma, and also then how we actually address and move through understanding racism. I don't know if you know much about Australia, but it's a very casually racist place, but also this restoration of connections generationally and this kind of thing. So my take-home message is really is what I found was this ongoing need to ensure that our research practices amplify and listens to voices, and thinking about how we can be, how do we hold it steady in relation to privileging voices is quite tricksy, because we can also make our own opinions. Historical trauma recognises the lasting and ongoing experience of continuing colonisation. So it's a continuing, presenting, current issue for us moving forward. And sharing and amplifying of our stories of survivance to continually create space for healing, connection, and belonging is needed. And I'm doing an interview today with Paul Ramsey Foundation. Hopefully 15 people only got to do it. And I'm really hoping to extend survivance work, because survivance is internationally widely recognised as an antidote to address historical trauma. If you look at Joe Gorn's work, you'll be able to see that. But really, research has to be positioned within that relational ontology, epistemology, axology. So research has to be translated with and by our communities. There's some references there, and it's been such a pleasure to yarn with you today. Oh, look at all the claps.
I think Jacob's got his hand up.
Oh, he's gonna clap.
He's clapping.
Rakita, while Tom here, while people are thinking of questions or statements, there's a few words I always get stuck on. Holistic is one of them, and resilience is another one. And I'm interested in your thoughts from your work around resilience versus survivance, and how you now see resilience, because I get the feeling that you had some trouble with that word as well, or did have. Yeah.
Oh. Well, yes, it's laden in Western psychology, etc., with just so many. I think what the thing is, it's because this individual autonomous self can fix themselves and get better, like, bounce back, that type of narrative. But when you position Indigenous anything, for me to be Aboriginal is because it's a relational concept. And I think that's what health is, that's what well-being is, that's what social emotional well-being is. So the positioning of resilience, I would now use only resilience in my work as long as I positioned it as Indigenous resilience, because Indigenous resilience positions that collectiveness of it, the collective notion that we have a shared experience of colonialism, we have a shared experience of ongoing systemic injustices and equities, but we also have a collective spirit and care of strength and love and respect and humility, and grounded in Indigenous knowledges in relation to our resilience as well. And so I think I sort of positioned it as really challenging the word, and I actually didn't want to reference the word or use the word in my work, but kind of like PTSD, right? Complex or post-traumatic stress syndrome, resilience is the antidote. But when you think about historical trauma, survivance is the antidote, because of that presencing process of knowing your own story and then understanding, well, how can I be an active presence in my story? So whether that means being educated or being a really good family member, or going and accessing my culture and language, or being part of native title, etc. So I hope that answers. Yeah, you asked, I've done literature reviews on it, and I wrote a paper on it, and I still challenged right to the very end to actually put resilience in there. So I'm glad you put that there.
No, that's a great response, and it's really, for me, I have similar feelings around the word from a different perspective. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. Very informed. Thank you.
John?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to for our US participants, just extend the huge amount of value that Rakita brings to our school from a non-Western perspective. Like, it's just amazing how she makes us think of completely different ways of thinking. And I guess the practical importance of this is that with our Indigenous Australians not feeling part of or not knowing who they are or feeling part of systems, they don't feel safe to enter westernized healthcare, and that's a big problem. So I guess the practicality around this is helping them have an identity, and for us to then understand a little bit more around what makes things culturally safe for Indigenous people, so they will be more likely to access healthcare. So I guess that's the practicality of this, and I just love the way that it's just such. It blows my mind how it just comes from a place that I don't even think of and kind of even understand myself. So yeah,
Me
thanks.
either, John.
Thanks. Yeah.
There's a lot of value in understanding identity in relationship to how we are positioned in Western health systems for everyone, actually, I would say. But yeah, sorry, Jacob, hello.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting presentation, and you're really quite a poet. I hope you're going to
Hey.
continue in that line. Uh, I'm just curious about lessons you may have learned from the US. Like after George Floyd, there was a lot of public awareness and corporate and academic commitment to inclusion and recognition of marginalized communities. And now the pendulum, the political pendulum has, swung on their opposite direction, and people are, scrambling and deleting language related to all of that. Do you see that kind of a danger in Australia? And what are your considerations to keep this important work going forward despite the politics?
Hmm. I think we need, I've positioned my understanding of that pendulum in the risk. Like I think we can go too far with painting things with culture and language, and particularly if we do it from a place that just does it because it's a tokenistic gesture. But in my response to the fear and the concern is um, the critical hope needed. Playing with Pablo Frere's critical hope and this idea that you're not just a fish in polluted water hoping that the water's going to get better. And that's why I think survivance is so key, is because even though the pendulum's going to swish, and we're going to have that here in Australia, we've kind of gone right over to the left and here we come and slowly back, slowly back. But what I think it is this idea of this agitation and this continuing process. And, whilst those knowledges might be removed from places, they're still there. Whilst languages are taken away, they're still there. And I think I play a lot with Bayo Alchemalaus. He's a beautiful philosopher, Ubuntu philosopher, and he plays with this idea of, we need new paradigms. We need new ways. We need new ways to think and unpack and understand. We need to look for the cracks. And I guess I just like to play around in that, we're going to see a shift. And yeah, I think when I was just about to submit my thesis back in 2023, Jacob, Australia said no. Australia said no to a voice vote, which basically was a very simple mechanism which ensured that all 260 nations in this country had a way or a mechanism to influence the government on decisions that matter to us. So I'm not scared. I am not scared about the pendulum shift if it goes right back, because I know for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, there is love carried, there is hope carried, there is strength carried, there is language, there's culture, there's everything carried. And it's about remembering and honoring and acknowledging that. It's about remembering and acknowledging that. And whatever stuff happens, whatever political agenda, and that's Aboriginal people have always been such a critical part of the political agenda here in this country. Eve Tuck, or no, Eve Tuck plays a little bit of Welsh. She's over in America, but sorry, not Eve Tuck. Sana Nakata talks about how Australians' nationhood has always been so inherently tied up in the relationship with Indigenous peoples, and that's why that idea of we are a problem to be solved We've always been used as a political chess piece to be, Labor, or someone might use us in different ways. So I guess there's always going to be that pendulum shift. We've always had it in our experiences. We've always got to do it. You know what I mean? It's always there. But I think also our presencing and our hope and our love and our care and all the things that hold us in our communities is also positive as well. So I don't know. Doesn't answer your question, does it? It's a hard one.
Great.
A hard one.
Thank you so much, Rakita. That was fabulous.
Mm.
That's fabulous. I'm just conscious of the time. I can share off, or unless you put your email in the chat, Rakita, I can share it
Oh,
off.
yeah.
If there's any other questions or anything.
I just done a keynote a couple of weeks ago, which is on there now. They've uploaded it. So if you just type in my name on Facebook or YouTube,
Oh,
if you want to,
fabulous.
yeah.
Fabulous.
If you're interested in knowing a bit more about my research stuff.
Thank you, Rakita. I think that was really interesting. And there's definitely some crosstalk between our two countries. Yeah, in the reference of time, I just wanted to wish everybody, happy Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you celebrate. And John, if you want to maybe set up a meeting, we can kind of talk about maybe next steps now that we've had a few of these webinars under our belt, and maybe we can brainstorm and think of some new things that we could do to boost the collaborations. But maybe we can get one on the books in the next couple weeks or so.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be great. We've got some ideas here as well, so I think we should definitely get together in the new year and really think next steps. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I'll send you an email.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Have
everyone.
a
Happy
good-
holidays.
Have a good day, I guess.
You too.
Bye.
Yalu.
Bye.